They called her Ghost behind her back. Watching her glide through the university hallways with movements so fluid, they seemed to defy the laws of physics. What they didn't know was that those same legs had once carried her through a minefield in Kandahar, where she'd defused 17 improvised explosive devices in a single day while enemy fire rained down around her. The morning sun cast long shadows across Princeton University's engineering quad as Dr. Elena Vasquez limped toward the material science building. Her gait was so subtle that most students rushing to their 8 a.m. classes barely noticed the slight hesitation in her left step, the almost imperceptible way she favored her right leg when navigating the stone steps that led to her basement laboratory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Professor Marcus Wellington certainly noticed. He'd been watching Elena's every movement for the past 6 months, cataloging what he perceived as weaknesses with the methodical precision of a predator studying wounded prey. From his corner office on the 3rd floor, Wellington had an unobstructed view of the main walkway, and he'd positioned his desk specifically to observe the daily parade of faculty members arriving for work. Elena represented everything Wellington despised about modern academia's supposed commitment to diversity and inclusion. At 32, she was the youngest tenured professor in the engineering department, a fact that grated against his traditional sensibilities like sandpaper on exposed nerve endings. Her rapid ascension through academic ranks, combined with her obvious physical limitations, confirmed his theory that standards had been lowered to accommodate candidates who checked the right demographic boxes. The engineering building's main corridor buzzed with the familiar chaos of semester startup. Graduate students hurried between labs with armloads of research materials, while undergraduate freshmen wandered with the lost expressions of people trying to decipher building layouts that seemed designed by architects with a sadistic sense of humor. Elena moved through this controlled chaos with practiced efficiency, acknowledging colleagues with polite nods while maintaining the professional distance she'd cultivated since accepting her position at Princeton. Her laboratory occupied the building's basement level, a deliberate assignment that kept her research away from the high-traffic areas where visiting donors and media representatives might encounter her. The space itself was cramped and poorly ventilated, equipped with outdated instruments that required constant maintenance to function at acceptable levels. Most professors would have protested such accommodations, but Elena had accepted the assignment without complaint, transforming the neglected space into a model of organization and efficiency. The laboratory's security system recognized Elena's keycard with a soft beep, admitting her to the sanctuary where she conducted research that consistently produced breakthrough results despite the limitations of her equipment. Her work focused on advanced metallurgy and composite materials, with particular emphasis on developing lighter, stronger alloys for industrial applications. The technical complexity of her projects required understanding of chemistry, physics, and engineering principles that few researchers could integrate effectively. Elena's research assistant, David Chen, was already at work when she arrived, calibrating instruments with the meticulous attention to detail that had made him invaluable despite being only a second-year graduate student. David had requested assignment to Elena's lab specifically because her reputation for innovative methodology and rigorous analysis made her one of the most sought-after mentors in the department. "Professor Vasquez," David said without looking up from the spectral analysis equipment he was adjusting, "I've prepared the samples for today's tensile strength testing. The new titanium composite is showing promising preliminary results, but we'll need at least 12 hours of continuous testing to verify the stability parameters." Elena hung her jacket on the hook near her desk, a movement that David had learned to watch carefully. On days when her injury was particularly bothersome, she would hang the jacket with deliberate precision, taking extra moments to ensure it was perfectly positioned. This morning's careful movement suggested she was managing more discomfort than usual, though her expression revealed nothing of whatever pain she might be experiencing. The testing schedule looked aggressive, but Elena had learned to maximize productivity during periods when her physical condition allowed extended laboratory work. Her research required long hours of standing, precise manual manipulation of equipment, and the kind of sustained concentration that became increasingly difficult when chronic pain flared beyond manageable levels. "Thank you, David," Elena replied, settling into her desk chair with the practiced grace of someone who'd learned to make every movement appear effortless despite underlying challenges. "Let's begin with the baseline measurements. I want to establish clear parameters before we introduce any variables that might affect the results." David had worked with Elena long enough to recognize the subtle signs that indicated her injury was affecting her more than usual. She spoke with the same professional clarity, but her responses came after slightly longer pauses, as if she needed extra moments to process information through whatever discomfort she was managing. Her movements remained fluid and purposeful, but they carried an economy of motion that suggested someone conserving energy for essential tasks. The morning's work proceeded with the methodical rhythm that characterized Elena's approach to research. Every measurement was recorded with precision, every observation documented according to protocols that ensured reproducible results. Her laboratory notebooks were works of art, filled with detailed drawings, mathematical calculations, and theoretical analysis that revealed the depth of her understanding across multiple scientific disciplines. Wellington's harassment campaign had begun subtly, with seemingly innocent questions about Elena's qualifications during department meetings. He would wonder aloud whether someone with her obvious physical limitations could handle the demands of advanced materials research, particularly projects that required extensive laboratory work and international travel to industrial facilities. His concerns were always framed as thoughtful consideration for Elena's well-being, expressed with the kind of paternal condescension that made direct confrontation difficult without appearing defensive or ungrateful. Wellington had perfected the art of professional undermining. Using his decades of experience and extensive network of academic connections to isolate Elena while maintaining plausible deniability about his motives. The campaign escalated when Elena's research began attracting attention from major industrial sponsors. Her innovative work on lightweight composite materials had potential applications in aerospace, automotive, and construction industries, making her laboratory a valuable asset for university fundraising efforts. Wellington viewed this success as a threat to his own relevance, particularly since his research hadn't produced significant breakthroughs in over a decade. During the weekly department meeting, Wellington raised concerns about Elena's ability to manage the increased responsibilities that came with major industrial partnerships. His voice carried the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to having his opinions treated as definitive judgments, and his words were carefully chosen to plant seeds of doubt without making accusations that could be challenged directly. "Colleagues," Wellington announced from his position at the head of the conference table, "we need to discuss the wisdom of placing our most visible industrial partnerships under the supervision of faculty members who may not be equipped to handle the associated demands. International travel, extended site visits, and intensive collaboration require physical capabilities that not all our researchers possess." The other department members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, recognizing that Wellington was targeting Elena without having the courage to address his concerns directly. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the department's associate chair, attempted to redirect the conversation toward more constructive topics, but Wellington's influence within the university's power structure made direct confrontation professionally dangerous. Elena sat quietly during Wellington's presentation, taking notes with the same methodical precision she brought to her laboratory work. Her expression remained professionally neutral, giving no indication of how his words affected her personally. She'd learned to compartmentalize emotional responses, focusing on controllable factors, while avoiding the energy drain that came from engaging with institutional politics. After the meeting, Elena returned to her laboratory, where David was preparing samples for the afternoon's testing protocol. The familiar environment of scientific instruments and research materials provided refuge from the political tensions that seemed to follow her through the university's administrative spaces. "Professor, is everything all right?" David asked, noting the slight tension in Elena's shoulders that indicated stress beyond her usual physical discomfort. The meeting seemed particularly intense today. Elena considered her response carefully, unwilling to burden her student with concerns that were beyond his ability to address. "Academic politics are part of the profession," she said simply. "The important thing is maintaining focus on the research that matters." David nodded, but he'd been observing Elena long enough to recognize when she was managing more than just professional challenges. Her injury clearly affected her daily life in ways that most people didn't understand, but there were other layers to her situation that remained mysterious, despite months of working closely together. The afternoon's experiments proceeded with characteristic efficiency, but David noticed that Elena seemed more focused than usual on documentation and protocol adherence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Every step of their testing process was recorded with exceptional detail, as if she was creating a record that could withstand the most rigorous scrutiny. Her mathematical analysis was flawless, her theoretical framework comprehensive, and her experimental design showed the kind of sophisticated thinking that separated exceptional researchers from merely competent ones. Elena's apartment reflected the same organized efficiency that characterized her laboratory work. The space was modest but comfortable, furnished with pieces that prioritized function over aesthetics. Medical equipment was discreetly integrated into the living space, with a physical therapy station positioned near the large windows that provided natural light for her evening exercise routine. The walls held no personal photographs, no mementos from her previous career, no evidence of the life she'd lived before excepting her academic position. Elena had deliberately created an environment that focused on the present rather than the past, avoiding reminders of experiences that remained too painful for casual reflection. Her evening routine began with the same ritual that had structured her days for the past 4 years. Elena removed her prosthetic devices with practiced efficiency, revealing the extent of injuries that she concealed beneath carefully chosen clothing and adaptive technology. The scars on both legs told a story of trauma that extended far beyond any academic challenge she might face at Princeton. The physical therapy session that followed was as methodical as her research protocols, with exercises designed to maintain strength and flexibility despite the limitations imposed by her injuries. Elena approached rehabilitation with the same analytical mindset she brought to material science, tracking progress with detailed measurements and adjusting her routine based on objective assessment of results. Dr. Lisa Park, Elena's physical therapist, had been working with her since she'd arrived in Princeton. Their sessions revealed capabilities that seemed inconsistent with Elena's apparent limitations, suggesting that her injuries were being managed according to specialized protocols rather than standard rehabilitation approaches. Your muscle development continues to exceed typical expectations for someone with your injury pattern, Dr. Park observed during their weekly session. The strength and coordination you maintain suggests previous training that went far beyond normal fitness programs. Have you considered increasing the intensity of your rehabilitation routine? Elena's response was consistent with her approach to all inquiries about her background. Current protocols are achieving adequate results for my professional requirements. No need to risk complications by exceeding established parameters. The answer was reasonable on the surface, but Dr. Park's experience with trauma patients suggested there was more to Elena's situation than simple acceptance of limitations. The scars on her legs showed patterns consistent with explosive injuries, and her movement patterns indicated someone who'd undergone extensive specialized rehabilitation rather than standard medical treatment. Elena's academic reputation continued to grow despite Wellington's attempts to undermine her credibility. Her research papers were being cited by leading scientists worldwide, and industrial partners were requesting her consultation on projects that could revolutionize materials engineering. The disconnect between her professional success and Wellington's characterization of her as inadequate was becoming increasingly difficult for other faculty members to ignore. Dr. Martinez began conducting her own informal investigation into Elena's background, driven by curiosity about the inconsistencies she'd observed. Elena's curriculum vitae showed a gap of several years between her doctoral work and her arrival at Princeton, a period that was explained simply as postdoctoral research at undisclosed government facilities. The explanation was plausible for someone working in advanced materials science, where classified defense applications often required researchers to work under security restrictions that prevented public disclosure of their activities. But Martinez's experience with academic career progression suggested that Elena's path had been unusual, even accounting for the secrecy surrounding defense-related research. Elena's teaching responsibilities provided another venue where Wellington could observe and critique her performance. She'd been assigned to teach undergraduate courses in materials fundamentals, classes that required extensive standing and movement around laboratory spaces. Wellington made a point of conducting surprise observations, hoping to document instances where Elena's physical limitations compromised her effectiveness as an instructor. Instead, he found himself watching someone whose teaching methods were remarkably innovative and effective. Elena had developed techniques for demonstrating complex concepts that engaged students while accommodating her own physical needs. Her lectures were models of clarity and organization, her laboratory instruction was thorough and safe, and her student evaluations consistently ranked among the highest in the department. The students themselves were unaware of Elena's injury, seeing only a professor who moved with purpose and spoke with authority about subjects that many found intimidating. Her ability to explain complex theoretical concepts in accessible terms made her classes popular, while her laboratory instruction emphasized safety protocols and analytical thinking that prepared students for advanced coursework. Professor Vasquez makes everything make sense, one student wrote in their course evaluation. She explains things in ways that help you understand not just what happens, but why it happens. Her lab sessions are challenging but fair, and she really cares about helping students succeed. Wellington's frustration with Elena's success led him to escalate his campaign through administrative channels. He began filing formal complaints about her research methods, questioning her equipment usage, and suggesting that her laboratory should be subject to additional safety inspections due to concerns about her ability to respond to emergencies. The complaints were carefully crafted to appear concerned with legitimate safety and procedural issues, but their timing and frequency suggested personal animosity rather than professional oversight. Elena responded to each complaint with detailed documentation that demonstrated her adherence to all safety protocols and her laboratory's exemplary safety record. Elena's research continued to produce breakthrough results that attracted international attention. Her work on self-healing composite materials had potential applications that could transform multiple industries, making her one of Princeton's most valuable faculty members from a revenue generation perspective. The university's administration began taking notice of her contributions while simultaneously becoming aware of the unusual level of complaints being filed against her. Dean Robert Harrison called Elena to his office for what he described as a routine faculty review, but the meeting's timing suggested it was related to Wellington's campaign. Elena prepared for the discussion with the same methodical approach she brought to all professional challenges, assembling documentation that demonstrated her research productivity, teaching effectiveness, and service contributions. Professor Vasquez, Dean Harrison began, settling behind his desk with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to managing academic personalities. Your research has been generating significant positive attention for the university. Industrial partners are specifically requesting collaboration with your laboratory, and your publication record is exceptional. Elena waited for the inevitable transition to concerns or criticisms, recognizing the diplomatic pattern that typically preceded difficult conversations. Her expression remained professionally neutral, neither defensive nor anticipatory. However, Harrison continued, "There have been some concerns raised about your laboratory operations and safety protocols. Professor Wellington has filed several reports suggesting that additional oversight might be beneficial, particularly given the nature of your research and the potential risks involved." This suggestion was tactfully phrased, but Elena understood that Wellington's campaign was affecting administrative perceptions of her work. She responded with calm professionalism, providing detailed explanations of her safety procedures and offering to arrange a comprehensive inspection of her laboratory by independent safety experts. Elena's evening routine provided refuge from the increasing pressure of Wellington's administrative harassment. Her apartment became a sanctuary where she could focus on the physical and mental disciplines that maintained her resilience, despite the challenges she faced professionally. The meditation practice that concluded each day served multiple purposes, helping her manage both chronic pain and the psychological stress of navigating institutional politics while concealing the true nature of her background and capabilities. Elena had learned to compartmentalize different aspects of her existence, maintaining professional effectiveness while protecting secrets that could reshape everything if they were ever revealed. Her sleep was often interrupted by dreams that transported her back to environments far removed from academic laboratories, where the skills that had saved her life remained too dangerous for civilian disclosure. The transition from her previous career to academic research had required not just physical rehabilitation, but psychological adaptation to a world where the stakes were measured in research grants rather than human lives. Elena's morning routine began before dawn, with exercises designed to maintain capabilities that extended far beyond what her current position required. The precision of her movements, the efficiency of her preparations, and the automatic assessment of her environment reflected training that had nothing to do with materials, science, and everything to do with survival in circumstances that most people couldn't imagine. David arrived at the laboratory to find Elena already deep in analysis of overnight test results, her focus complete, despite whatever challenges she might be managing personally. Her dedication to excellence in research provided a model that inspired him to pursue his own work with similar rigor and attention to detail. Professor David said as he reviewed the data Elena had compiled, "These results are extraordinary. The composite materials you've developed show strength-to-weight ratios that exceed anything currently available commercially. This could revolutionize aerospace applications." Elena nodded, but her expression carried the careful neutrality of someone who understood that scientific breakthroughs could attract attention that wasn't always beneficial. Innovation in materials science often had applications that extended beyond civilian uses, and her expertise made her work valuable to organizations that preferred to operate away from public scrutiny. The morning's research continued with experiments that pushed the boundaries of materials engineering, testing theoretical limits and exploring possibilities that could reshape entire industries. Elena's methodology combined rigorous scientific analysis with intuitive understanding of how materials behaved under extreme conditions, knowledge that seemed to come from direct experience rather than academic study. Wellington's latest escalation involved questioning Elena's research funding sources, suggesting that her grants might not be appropriate for academic environments. His implications were subtle but clear, hinting that Elena's work might have connections to classified defense applications that compromised the university's commitment to open scientific inquiry. The accusation was particularly insidious because it contained elements of truth that Elena couldn't address without revealing information that remained classified long after her transition to civilian life. Her funding did include grants from defense-related agencies, but such support was common in materials research and entirely appropriate for academic institutions. Elena's response was to document every aspect of her funding sources and research applications, creating a comprehensive record that demonstrated the civilian nature of her current work while avoiding any reference to her previous career. The process required careful navigation between transparency and security, maintaining academic openness while protecting information that could compromise ongoing operations. Wellington's harassment campaign reached new levels of vindictiveness when he began targeting Elena's graduate students, suggesting that working with her might compromise their career prospects. The intimidation tactic was designed to isolate Elena professionally, while undermining her ability to maintain the research program that had made her valuable to the university. David found himself questioned about Elena's research methods, her laboratory procedures, and her fitness to supervise graduate work. The inquiries were framed as routine administrative oversight, but their frequency and focus made Wellington's intentions clear to anyone paying attention. Professor Vasquez is the most dedicated researcher I've ever worked with, David told Dr. Martinez during one such inquiry. Her methodology is flawless, her safety procedures exceed department standards, and her mentoring has prepared me for advanced research better than any other graduate program could have. If there are concerns about her work, they must be based on misunderstanding rather than actual observation. Elena's students consistently defended her competence and dedication, providing testimony that contradicted Wellington's characterization of her as inadequate or dangerous. Their loyalty was based on direct experience with her exceptional capabilities and genuine commitment to their educational development. The physical demands of Elena's research were becoming increasingly challenging, as Wellington's harassment created additional stress that exacerbated her chronic pain. The combination of long laboratory hours, administrative pressures, and the emotional toll of systematic persecution pushed her toward physical limits that she managed through sheer determination and careful resource allocation. Dr. Park noticed changes in Elena's condition during their therapy sessions, observing increased muscle tension and reduced range of motion that suggested she was operating under greater stress than usual. The physical therapist's concern extended beyond immediate symptoms to the long-term implications of sustained pressure on someone managing complex trauma recovery. "You're showing signs of overexertion that could compromise your recovery progress," Dr. Park warned during their session. "Whatever additional stress you're managing needs to be addressed before it causes setbacks that could affect your long-term functionality." Elena's response reflected her characteristic approach to challenges that seemed beyond her direct control. Stress management is part of professional responsibility. Current protocols are adequate for maintaining necessary performance levels. The answer satisfied Dr. Park's professional obligations while avoiding discussion of circumstances that Elena preferred to handle privately. The physical therapist had learned to recognize when her patient was managing challenges that extended beyond medical issues, requiring support that respected Elena's need for privacy while ensuring her physical well-being. Wellington's campaign entered its most dangerous phase when he began researching Elena's background through unofficial channels, using his academic connections to investigate the gap in her curriculum vitae that covered her transition from doctoral work to her current position. His inquiries were discreet but persistent, driven by certainty that Elena was hiding something that would justify his harassment if properly exposed. The investigation process required careful navigation of security restrictions and classification protocols, But Wellington's persistence and extensive network of contacts provided access to information that most people couldn't obtain. His discovery of Elena's military service record would have significant implications for both her academic career and her personal safety. Elena remained unaware of Wellington's background investigation while continuing her research with characteristic dedication and precision. Her work was approaching breakthrough discoveries that could establish her as one of the leading materials scientists of her generation, achievements that made Wellington's harassment campaign increasingly difficult to justify through official channels. The laboratory's evening quiet provided Elena with the focused environment she needed for her most complex analysis work. David had left hours earlier, but Elena often worked late into the night when her concentration was sharpest and interruptions were minimal. These solitary hours allowed her to pursue theoretical questions that required sustained intellectual effort without the social demands that complicated her days. Elena's injury management required constant attention to factors that healthy people took for granted. The basement laboratory's concrete floors created challenges for extended standing, while the building's climate control systems often made temperature regulation difficult for someone whose circulation had been affected by traumatic injury. She'd adapted her work routines to accommodate these limitations without compromising research quality, developing techniques that maximized efficiency while minimizing physical stress. Her solutions were often innovative enough to benefit other researchers, though Elena rarely discussed her adaptive methods to avoid drawing attention to the challenges that necessitated them. The evening's work focused on the theoretical modeling of material behavior under extreme conditions, analysis that required integration of complex mathematical relationships with empirical data from her experiments. Elena's capability in this area exceeded what most researchers could achieve, suggesting educational background that extended far beyond her documented academic training. Wellington's background research had begun producing results that surprised even his cynical expectations. Elena's military service record, heavily redacted but still revealing, showed deployment patterns and specializations that indicated involvement in operations far removed from conventional academic preparation. Her transition to civilian life had been managed through programs designed for personnel, whose skills made them valuable assets requiring careful career placement. The discovery that Elena had served as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist explained many of the inconsistencies Wellington had observed in her behavior and capabilities. Her analytical approach to complex problems, her methodical safety procedures, and her ability to remain calm under pressure reflected training designed to function effectively in life-threatening situations. More significantly, Wellington learned that Elena's injuries had been sustained during combat operations, not training accidents or civilian mishaps. The medical records he accessed through unofficial channels revealed trauma patterns consistent with explosive device encounters, injuries that had required extensive rehabilitation and ongoing management. Elena's daily routine included morning exercises that served purposes beyond standard physical therapy, maintaining capabilities that had saved her life during military service and might be necessary again if her current situation became untenable. Her apartment's security arrangements reflected awareness of threats that extended beyond typical civilian concerns, preparation for circumstances that most academics never needed to consider. The medication schedule that managed Elena's chronic pain was supplemented by mental disciplines learned during military training, techniques for functioning effectively despite physical discomfort that would incapacitate people without her specialized preparation. Her ability to maintain professional performance while managing significant medical challenges reflected resilience developed through experiences that had tested her limits in ways that academic stress could not approach. Wellington's research into Elena's background also revealed why her academic appointment had come with unusual security considerations and administrative oversight. Personnel with her skills and experience required careful career management to ensure their capabilities were utilized appropriately, while protecting operational security about methods and applications that remained classified. Elena's transformation from military specialist to academic researcher represented successful transition of valuable human assets from defense applications to civilian productivity. Her materials science expertise built upon knowledge gained through direct experience with explosive devices and protective technologies, creating a unique perspective that enhanced her research capabilities while serving broader national interests. The irony of Wellington's harassment campaign was becoming apparent as he learned more about Elena's actual qualifications and background. His assumption that she represented declining academic standards was contradicted by evidence that she possessed capabilities far exceeding what any normal hiring process could have identified or evaluated. Elena's presence at Princeton represented an investment in cutting-edge research by organizations that understood the value of her unique expertise. Her work had potential applications that extended far beyond civilian industry, contributing to defensive technologies and protective systems that served national security interests while advancing scientific knowledge. Wellington faced a decision about how to use the information he'd obtained through his unauthorized investigation. Revealing Elena's military background could expose her to dangers that extended beyond academic politics, while his harassment campaign was increasingly difficult to justify given her exceptional performance and obvious competence. Elena's research continued advancing toward discoveries that would establish her reputation permanently, while contributing to technologies that could save lives in both civilian and military applications. Her dedication to excellence reflected values instilled through military service, commitment to mission accomplishment that extended far beyond personal recognition or career advancement. The contrast between Elena's actual capabilities and Wellington's perception of her as inadequate represented a fundamental misunderstanding of what true strength looked like. Her quiet professionalism concealed experiences that had tested her courage and competence under conditions that would have broken people without her specialized training and innate resilience. Wellington's unauthorized investigation had armed him with fragments of Elena's classified background, but he lacked the complete picture that would explain the true scope of her capabilities. His discovery of her military service record filled him with vindictive satisfaction, convinced that he'd found the ammunition needed to destroy her academic career permanently. What he failed to understand was that Elena Vasquez had survived circumstances that made his petty harassment seem insignificant by comparison. The escalation began during the monthly faculty mixer, a social gathering that Elena typically avoided, but had been specifically required to attend by Dean Harrison. The event was held in the university's historic faculty club, with its mahogany paneling and portraits of distinguished Princeton alumni creating an atmosphere of academic tradition that made Elena's presence feel like an intrusion rather than an invitation. Wellington had spent hours preparing for this opportunity, researching tactical approaches that would maximize Elena's humiliation while providing him with plausible deniability. He positioned himself near the entrance, ensuring that he could intercept Elena when she arrived and orchestrate the confrontation in front of as many witnesses as possible. Elena entered the faculty club with characteristic caution, her eyes automatically scanning the room for potential threats and escape routes, before focusing on the social dynamics that would determine her strategy for navigating the evening. She'd learned to read room atmospheres with the same precision she brought to materials analysis, identifying alliances and hostilities that could affect her professional standing. Wellington approached with predatory confidence, flanked by two junior faculty members who'd been recruited to provide an audience for his performance. His smile carried the kind of malicious anticipation that preceded carefully planned cruelty, and his body language suggested someone who believed he held decisive advantages in whatever confrontation was about to unfold. "Elena," Wellington called out with false joviality that carried clearly across the room's conversations, "so wonderful that you could join us tonight. I was just telling colleagues about the fascinating gaps in your curriculum vitae. Perhaps you could enlighten us about your postdoctoral research experiences." The question was designed to force Elena into either revealing classified information or appearing evasive about legitimate career experiences. Wellington's research had revealed enough about her military background to construct accusations that would be difficult to refute, without compromising operational security that remained in effect years after her service ended. Elena's response reflected the diplomatic skills she'd developed for managing situations where direct confrontation could escalate beyond controllable limits. "My postdoctoral work involved materials research for government contractors. The applications were specialized but contributed valuable experience to my current academic focus." The answer was professionally appropriate but deliberately vague, providing Wellington with exactly the opening he'd been seeking. His follow-up questions came with increasing aggression, challenging Elena's credibility while implying that her academic appointment represented preferential treatment rather than merit-based selection. "Government contractors," Wellington repeated with theatrical skepticism. How convenient that such important work remains mysteriously undocumented in public records. One might wonder whether these claimed experiences actually occurred, or whether certain demographic considerations influenced your hiring, despite questionable qualifications. The accusation of false credentials was particularly dangerous because it struck at the foundation of academic integrity while containing enough truth to be difficult to disprove. Elena's actual government work remained classified, making detailed refutation impossible without violating security protocols that could result in federal prosecution. Elena's hand moved unconsciously to her left thigh, where scar tissue created phantom sensations that intensified during periods of high stress. The gesture was so subtle that most observers missed it entirely, but Wellington had been studying her behavioral patterns long enough to recognize signs of discomfort that he could exploit for maximum effect. Dr. Martinez attempted to redirect the conversation toward less contentious topics, but Wellington's supporters had positioned themselves to maintain focus on Elena's background and qualifications. The social gathering had transformed into an informal tribunal, with Elena's academic legitimacy being questioned in front of colleagues whose opinions could affect her career prospects. Elena endured the systematic character assassination with stoic professionalism, responding to each accusation with measured dignity that refused to provide Wellington with the emotional reaction he was clearly seeking. Her composure under attack impressed some observers while frustrating Wellington's attempts to portray her as unstable or unsuitable for academic responsibilities. The confrontation escalated when Wellington began making pointed references to Elena's physical limitations, suggesting that her obvious mobility issues represented undisclosed health problems that could compromise her research effectiveness. His questions were framed as concerned inquiries about accommodations, but their timing and tone made his malicious intent obvious to anyone paying careful attention. Elena's injury affects more than just her walking, Wellington announced to the growing crowd of faculty members who'd been drawn to the spectacle. One has to wonder whether cognitive functions might also be impaired, particularly given the suspicious gaps in her documented experience and the questionable nature of her claimed expertise. The suggestion that Elena's head injury had affected her mental capabilities was calculated to undermine confidence in her research, while providing cover for Wellington's systematic harassment campaign. Several faculty members looked uncomfortable with the public humiliation they were witnessing, but institutional hierarchy made direct intervention professionally risky. Elena's response surprised everyone who expected defensive anger or emotional breakdown. Instead, she addressed Wellington's accusations with clinical precision, systematically dismantling his arguments while maintaining professional courtesy that made his behavior appear increasingly inappropriate by comparison. "Professor Wellington," Elena said calmly, "my research productivity and student evaluations provide objective measures of my professional capabilities. If you have specific concerns about my work quality, I'm happy to address them through appropriate administrative channels rather than social speculation." The answer demonstrated intellectual competence that contradicted Wellington's implications about cognitive impairment, while establishing Elena's willingness to engage with legitimate criticism through proper procedures. Her composed response frustrated Wellington's attempt to provoke an emotional reaction that would justify his characterization of her as unstable. Wellington's frustration with Elena's composed responses led him to abandon subtle implications in favor of direct accusations. He began questioning her research methods, suggesting that her innovative approaches to materials testing represented dangerous shortcuts that compromised safety protocols and produced unreliable results. The technical criticisms revealed Wellington's limited understanding of advanced materials science, as his objections demonstrated unfamiliarity with methodologies that had become standard practice at leading research institutions. Elena's patient explanations of her procedures exposed Wellington's ignorance while showcasing her expertise in ways that impressed the faculty members who possessed sufficient technical knowledge to evaluate her responses. Dr. James Foster, a senior professor in mechanical engineering, found himself increasingly uncomfortable with Wellington's public attack on a colleague whose work he'd been following with professional interest. Elena's research publications showed sophisticated understanding of materials behavior that Foster respected, making Wellington's accusations seem motivated by personal animosity rather than legitimate academic concerns. "Professor Wellington," Foster interjected during a brief pause in the interrogation, "Dr. Vasquez's recent paper on self-healing composite materials has been cited extensively by researchers at MIT and Stanford. Her methodology appears to meet the highest standards of scientific rigor. Perhaps we should focus on celebrating our colleagues' achievements rather than questioning their competence." The intervention provided Elena with temporary relief, while highlighting the growing discomfort among faculty members who were witnessing what increasingly appeared to be systematic harassment rather than legitimate professional inquiry. Wellington's behavior was beginning to reflect poorly on his own judgment and character, undermining his authority within the department. Elena used the momentary reprieve to extract herself from the confrontation with diplomatic grace. Thanking colleagues for their interest in her work, while suggesting that detailed technical discussions might be more appropriate in laboratory settings rather than social gatherings. Her withdrawal was strategic rather than retreat, removing herself from a situation that could only escalate in directions that served Wellington's purposes. The faculty mixer's aftermath generated conversations throughout the university community as word spread about Wellington's public attack on Elena. Opinion was divided between those who viewed his behavior as inappropriate harassment and others who wondered whether his accusations might contain legitimate concerns about Elena's qualifications or fitness for academic responsibilities. Elena returned to her apartment that evening with the careful movements of someone managing both physical discomfort and emotional stress. The confrontation had required sustained performance under hostile conditions, demanding energy reserves that left her drained despite her apparent composure during the encounter. Her evening routine included extended physical therapy sessions designed to address the muscle tension that accumulated during stressful situations. The exercises served multiple purposes, maintaining physical functionality while providing mental discipline that helped process challenging experiences without allowing them to compromise her professional effectiveness. David Chen arrived at the laboratory the following morning to find Elena already deep in analysis of experimental data, her focus complete despite whatever personal challenges she might be managing. Her dedication to research excellence provided stability that contrasted sharply with the interpersonal conflicts that seemed to follow her through the university's social spaces. Professor David said as he reviewed the overnight test results, "The composite strength measurements are exceeding our theoretical predictions. These materials could revolutionize protective applications across multiple industries. Your methodology is producing breakthrough results that will establish new standards for the field." Elena acknowledged the success with characteristic understatement, focusing attention on technical challenges that required continued investigation rather than celebrating achievements that might attract unwanted scrutiny. Her research had potential applications that extended beyond civilian industry, making discretion essential for both personal and professional reasons. The morning's experimental work proceeded with methodical precision, but David noticed subtle changes in Elena's behavior that suggested she was operating under additional stress. Her movements were more economical than usual, her responses slightly delayed, and her documentation even more thorough than normal, as if she was preparing for scrutiny that went beyond standard peer review. Wellington's investigation into Elena's background had expanded to include inquiries about her current research applications and funding sources. His unofficial network of contacts provided access to information that most faculty members couldn't obtain, revealing connections between Elena's work and defense-related organizations that supported his suspicions about her true qualifications and purposes. The discovery that Elena's research had potential military applications provided Wellington with new avenues for attack, allowing him to question whether her academic appointment represented inappropriate placement of defense personnel in civilian educational settings. His implications were subtle but persistent, suggesting that Elena's work might compromise the university's commitment to open scientific inquiry. Elena's response to increased scrutiny was to document every aspect of her research with exceptional thoroughness, creating records that would withstand the most rigorous examination while avoiding any reference to applications or methodologies that remained classified. The process required careful balance between transparency and security, maintaining academic openness while protecting information that could compromise ongoing operations. Dr. Martinez's informal investigation into Elena's situation had begun producing evidence that contradicted Wellington's characterization of her as inadequate or dangerous. Student evaluations consistently praised Elena's teaching effectiveness, while her research publications showed citations and collaborations that indicated recognition from leading scientists worldwide. The disconnect between Elena's documented achievements and Wellington's public accusations was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Martinez began consulting with other senior faculty members about the appropriateness of Wellington's behavior and its potential impact on the department's reputation and effectiveness. Elena's graduate students found themselves questioned about her research methods and laboratory procedures with increasing frequency, as Wellington supporters attempted to gather evidence that could support accusations of incompetence or corner-cutting. The inquiries were framed as routine administrative oversight, but their focus and intensity made their true purpose obvious to anyone paying attention. David's loyalty to Elena was tested when he was approached by Professor Anderson, one of Wellington's allies, who suggested that association with Elena might compromise his career prospects. The intimidation was subtle but unmistakable, designed to isolate Elena professionally while undermining her ability to maintain the research program that had made her valuable to the university. Professor Vasquez has taught me more about advanced materials research than any other mentor could have provided, David told Anderson during their meeting. Her methodology is flawless, her safety procedures exceed department standards, and her theoretical understanding is deeper than most professors with decades more experience. If there are concerns about her work, they must be based on misunderstanding rather than actual observation. Elena's students consistently defended her competence and dedication, providing testimony that contradicted Wellington's implications about her fitness for academic responsibilities. Their support was based on direct experience, with her exceptional capabilities and genuine commitment to their educational development, making Wellington's accusations appear increasingly unfounded and motivated by personal bias. The physical demands of maintaining her research program while managing Wellington's harassment campaign were pushing Elena toward limits that she'd learned to recognize during her military service. The combination of chronic pain, professional stress, and the emotional toll of systematic persecution required careful resource management to maintain effectiveness without compromising long-term functionality. Elena's evening routine expanded to include meditation practices that helped process the psychological challenges of operating in a hostile environment where direct confrontation could escalate beyond controllable limits. The techniques she'd learned during military training provided mental discipline that civilian stress management approaches couldn't match. Dr. Park noticed changes in Elena's physical condition during their therapy sessions, observing increased muscle tension and reduced range of motion that suggested she was managing stress levels that exceeded normal professional challenges. The physical therapist's concern extended beyond immediate symptoms to the long-term implications of sustained pressure on someone recovering from complex trauma. Your body is showing signs of chronic stress that could compromise your rehabilitation progress, Dr. Park warned during their session. Whatever additional pressures you're managing need to be addressed before they cause setbacks that could affect your long-term mobility and pain management. Elena's response reflected her characteristic approach to challenges that seem beyond her direct control, focusing on manageable factors while avoiding discussion of circumstances that remained classified or personally sensitive. Stress management techniques from my previous experience are proving adequate for maintaining necessary performance levels. Wellington's harassment campaign escalated when he began filing formal complaints about Elena's research procedures and laboratory safety protocols with university administration. His accusations were carefully crafted to appear concerned with legitimate oversight issues while targeting Elena's perceived vulnerabilities and physical limitations. The complaints questioned Elena's ability to respond effectively to laboratory emergencies, suggested that her research methods deviated from established safety standards, and implied that her physical condition created risks that could compromise student safety and university liability exposure. Each complaint required detailed administrative response that consumed time and energy Elena needed for her research activities. Elena's documentation of her safety procedures and emergency response capabilities was so thorough that it exceeded requirements for most research activities, revealing preparation that suggested experience with situations far more dangerous than typical academic laboratory work. Her protocols reflected understanding of hazardous materials and emergency procedures that most professors would never need to consider. The university's safety inspector, called in to investigate Wellington's complaints, found Elena's laboratory to be exemplary in its organization and adherence to safety protocols. Her emergency equipment was properly maintained, her chemical storage exceeded regulatory requirements, and her student training programs covered scenarios that most laboratories never addressed. Dr. Vasquez's safety protocols are among the most comprehensive I've encountered in academic settings, the inspector reported to Dean Harrison. Her emergency procedures suggest experience with hazardous situations that goes far beyond typical laboratory training. If anything, her approach exceeds standard requirements rather than falling short of them. The positive safety evaluation undermined Wellington's accusations while raising questions about Elena's background that Dean Harrison began investigating through unofficial channels. Her exceptional safety consciousness and emergency preparedness suggested previous experience that wasn't reflected in her academic curriculum vitae. Elena's research continued advancing toward breakthrough discoveries despite the increasing administrative distractions created by Wellington's complaint campaign. Her work on advanced composite materials was approaching commercial applications that could establish her as one of the leading materials scientists of her generation. The international attention her research was attracting included inquiries from government agencies and defense contractors who recognized the strategic value of her innovations. Elena's materials had potential applications in protective systems and military equipment that could save lives while advancing technological capabilities that served national security interests. Wellington's investigation into Elena's government connections provided him with enough information to construct accusations that were difficult to refute without revealing classified details about her previous career and current research applications. His strategy involved forcing Elena to choose between maintaining operational security and defending her academic reputation. The dilemma was carefully constructed to create maximum pressure while providing Wellington with plausible deniability about his motivations. If Elena revealed details about her military background to counter his accusations, she could compromise ongoing operations and violate security protocols. If she remained silent, Wellington could portray her secrecy as evidence of deception or incompetence. Elena's response was to focus intensively on producing research results that would speak for themselves, creating a body of work so exceptional that personal attacks would become irrelevant in the face of objective achievement. Her strategy required sustained excellence under pressure, demanding resources that pushed her toward physical and emotional limits. The laboratory became Elena's refuge from the political conflicts that seemed to follow her through the university's administrative and social spaces. Her research provided measurable progress toward goals that remained meaningful, despite the interpersonal challenges that complicated her professional life. David observed Elena's increasing dedication to laboratory work with concern about the sustainability of her current pace. Her commitment to excellence was inspiring, but the intensity of her focus suggested someone operating under pressure that extended beyond normal academic challenges. Professor David said during one of their late-evening research sessions, "Perhaps we should consider scaling back some of our experimental timelines. The breakthrough results we're achieving are impressive, but maintaining this pace might not be sustainable long-term." Elena's response reflected the survival mentalities she'd developed during military service, where mission accomplishment took precedence over personal comfort or convenience. Current research momentum represents opportunities that may not be available if we allow external factors to compromise our progress. The answers satisfied David's immediate concerns while avoiding discussion of the specific pressures that were driving Elena's intensified work schedule. Her dedication to research excellence provided stability and purpose that helped her navigate the hostile environment Wellington had created within the university community. Wellington's latest escalation involved questioning Elena's mental fitness for academic responsibilities, suggesting that her secretive behavior and resistance to inquiry indicated psychological instability that could compromise student safety and institutional effectiveness. His accusations were framed as concerned observations about behavioral patterns that warranted professional evaluation. The implications were particularly dangerous because they could trigger administrative actions that would be difficult to challenge without revealing information that Elena needed to keep confidential. Mental health evaluations could expose aspects of her condition and background that would compromise both her personal security and ongoing operations that remained classified. Elena's response was to demonstrate exceptional stability and competence in all her professional interactions, creating a record of consistent performance that would contradict any suggestions of psychological instability. Her strategy required maintaining perfect professional composure while managing stress levels that would have overwhelmed people without her specialized training. The contrast between Elena's composed professionalism and Wellington's increasingly erratic behavior was becoming apparent to faculty members who observed their interactions. Wellington's obsession with discrediting Elena was affecting his own reputation and effectiveness, while Elena's consistent excellence made his accusations appear motivated by personal animosity rather than legitimate concerns. Dr. Foster began documenting instances where Wellington's behavior seemed inappropriate or professionally questionable, building an informal case file that could support administrative intervention if the situation continued escalating. The senior professor's involvement signaled growing faculty concern about Wellington's conduct and its impact on departmental effectiveness. Elena's evening routine included preparing for scenarios where Wellington's campaign might force her to make difficult choices about revealing classified information or accepting professional consequences that could end her academic career. Her military training provided frameworks for contingency planning that helped her maintain stability despite uncertainty about future developments. The strategic thinking that had kept Elena alive during explosive ordnance disposal operations proved valuable for navigating academic politics where direct confrontation could escalate beyond controllable limits. Her approach emphasized patience, preparation, and careful resource management, while avoiding actions that could provide opponents with advantages in ongoing conflicts. Elena's research achievements continued accumulating despite the hostile environment Wellington had created, with her publications receiving international recognition and her innovations attracting interest from major industrial partners. The objective measures of her professional success made Wellington's accusations increasingly difficult to sustain among faculty members who could evaluate her contributions independently. The growing support for Elena among students and junior faculty created pressure for senior administration to address Wellington's behavior before it caused lasting damage to the department's reputation and effectiveness. His harassment campaign was beginning to reflect poorly on the university's commitment to maintaining professional standards and protecting faculty members from hostile work environments. Dr. Sara Martinez's investigation began with the kind of methodical approach that had earned her recognition as one of Princeton's most respected administrators. Her 20 years in academic leadership had taught her to recognize when faculty conflicts masked deeper issues, and Wellington's obsessive campaign against Elena triggered every instinct she'd developed for identifying dangerous situations before they escalated beyond control. Martinez possessed security clearances that most university administrators lacked, a legacy of her previous work as a consultant for defense research projects that required oversight of classified academic partnerships. Her access to restricted databases would prove crucial as she began piecing together the truth about Elena's background and the forces that had brought her to Princeton. The first breakthrough came when Martinez accessed Elena's complete personnel file through the Department of Defense Academic Placement Program. The heavily redacted documents revealed deployment patterns and specializations that painted a picture far removed from conventional academic preparation. Elena's military occupational specialty code indicated explosive ordnance disposal training, while her medical records showed injury patterns consistent with someone who'd encountered improvised explosive devices under combat conditions. Martinez found herself reading after-action reports that described operations where Elena had demonstrated exceptional skill under impossible circumstances. The reports, classified at levels that required special authorization to access, detailed her work disarming sophisticated explosive devices while under enemy fire, often in situations where single mistakes would have resulted in casualties that extended far beyond her own safety. The scope of Elena's expertise became clear as Martinez reviewed technical assessments of her EOD capabilities. Elena had specialized in the most complex categories of improvised explosive devices, including pressure plate systems, motion-activated triggers, and cascade arrangements designed to kill disposal specialists who successfully disarmed primary charges. Her success rate exceeded statistical norms by margins that suggested either extraordinary luck or capabilities that transcended standard training. Martinez's security clearance provided access to video footage from helmet cameras that documented Elena's work in Afghanistan and Iraq. The recordings showed someone operating with surgical precision under conditions that would have paralyzed most people with terror. Elena's movements were economical and confident, her decision-making process systematic despite the lethal consequences of error. One particular video captured Elena's response to a complex device that had killed 2 previous disposal specialists who'd attempted to render it safe. The explosive mechanism incorporated multiple redundant triggers designed to detonate if any single component was disturbed incorrectly. Elena spent 47 minutes analyzing the device's construction before beginning a disarmament sequence that required manipulating 7 separate components in precise order while insurgent forces maintained sniper fire on her position. The footage revealed capabilities that explained Elena's current behavior patterns in ways that Martinez was only beginning to understand. Her constant situational awareness, her methodical approach to complex problems, and her ability to remain calm under pressure reflected training designed to function effectively when mistakes meant death for herself and everyone depending on her expertise. Martinez's investigation expanded to include consultation with Dr. Michael Stevens, a psychiatrist who specialized in treating military personnel transitioning from combat roles to civilian careers. Stevens had worked with Elena during her rehabilitation at Walter Reed Medical Center, providing psychological support that addressed the unique challenges faced by EOD specialists, whose work required confronting mortality on a daily basis. Elena was one of our most successful transitions, Stevens explained during their secure video conference. EOD specialists face psychological pressures that exceed what most combat veterans experience, because their work involves constant exposure to devices specifically designed to kill them. Elena's injury occurred during her final deployment, but her psychological recovery was exceptional, considering the trauma she'd endured. The psychiatrist provided context that helped Martinez understand Elena's current situation and the reasons for her assignment to Princeton. Elena's expertise made her valuable for civilian applications, but her transition required careful management to ensure she could function effectively in environments that didn't require the hypervigilance that had kept her alive during military service. Stevens described Elena's injuries in clinical terms that made Martinez wince, despite her professional composure. The IED that ended Elena's military career had detonated while she was attempting to disarm a complex device in a marketplace crowded with civilians. Her decision to continue working despite incoming artillery fire had saved approximately 200 people, but the explosion that finally occurred had caused injuries that required years of rehabilitation. The blast pattern created distinctive scarring on both legs, Stevens explained. The wounds required extensive surgical reconstruction and ongoing pain management. Elena's ability to function at her current level represents remarkable recovery, but she'll always carry physical reminders of that final operation. Martinez began understanding why Elena's daily routine included so many adaptive behaviors that others interpreted as limitations or eccentricities. The return flight to Nevada gave Elena time to consider the implications of what she had heard in Washington. The Air Force was facing strategic challenges that required new approaches to air combat, and her unconventional success had suggested possibilities that senior leaders found compelling. But implementing these concepts would require her to transition from operational flying to instructional responsibilities. Back at Blackstone, Elena discovered that word of her Pentagon briefing had spread throughout the base community. Her fellow pilots approached her with a mixture of curiosity and respect, eager to learn what the senior leadership had wanted to discuss. Elena provided general information about tactical doctrine development while keeping the specific details classified as required. The squadron's dynamics had continued evolving since her remarkable performance. Captain Morrison had become one of her most dedicated students, spending hours studying her tactical concepts and requesting mentorship on advanced combat techniques. Lieutenant Chen had modified her own flying style based on Elena's energy management principles, achieving measurable improvements in her simulator scores. Technical Sergeant Santos noticed changes in how other maintenance personnel approached Elena's aircraft. The Block 15 F-16 was no longer viewed as obsolete equipment, but as a proven combat platform that had demonstrated exceptional capabilities in the right hands. Ground crews took additional pride in maintaining the aircraft that had achieved such remarkable success. Colonel Park called Elena into his office, a week after her return from Washington. His expression suggested he had received information about her Pentagon briefing that went beyond what she had shared with her squadron mates. Elena suspected that senior Air Force leadership had communicated their intentions regarding her future assignments. Major Vasquez Park began, "I've received preliminary information about a new program that the Air Force wants to establish. Advanced Tactical Innovation Center, based at Nellis Air Force Base. The mission would be developing and testing unconventional combat techniques for use in contested environments. They want you to lead the pilot training component." Elena had been expecting this conversation since her return from Washington, but hearing the formal details still felt surreal. Wellington's harassment campaign was targeting someone whose expertise and dedication far exceeded his own, making his behavior appear both professionally inappropriate and personally motivated. Elena remained unaware of Martinez's investigation while continuing her research with characteristic dedication and precision. Her work was approaching discoveries that could revolutionize protective technologies, while advancing scientific understanding of materials behavior under extreme conditions. The laboratory provided refuge from the political conflicts that seemed to follow her through the university's social spaces. David Chen's loyalty to Elena was strengthened when he witnessed her response to a laboratory emergency that revealed capabilities she'd previously concealed. A pressurized chemical reaction had gone wrong, creating conditions that threatened equipment damage and potential injuries if not addressed immediately. Elena's response demonstrated training that extended far beyond standard laboratory safety protocols. She moved with controlled urgency that suggested someone accustomed to operating under pressure where mistakes had consequences beyond equipment damage. Her systematic approach to containing the reaction and securing the laboratory revealed knowledge of emergency procedures that seemed more appropriate for military operations than academic research. "Professor, where did you learn those emergency response techniques?" David asked after Elena had successfully managed the crisis. "Your actions were incredibly professional and effective, but they seem to reflect training that goes beyond typical laboratory instruction." Elena's response was characteristically evasive while acknowledging David's observation. Previous work environments required comprehensive safety preparation. Emergency situations demand systematic responses that minimize risks to personnel and equipment. The answer satisfied David's immediate curiosity, while avoiding details about the specific training that had enabled Elena's exceptional emergency response. Her ability to function under pressure reflected experience with situations where lives depended on correct decisions made quickly and implemented flawlessly. Martinez's investigation reached its crucial phase when she obtained authorization to access Elena's complete medical records from her treatment at Walter Reed Medical Center. The files contained detailed documentation of injuries that revealed the full extent of trauma Elena had sustained during her final EOD operation. The medical records described bilateral leg injuries caused by an improvised explosive device that had detonated while Elena was attempting to render it safe. The blast had caused extensive tissue damage, bone fractures, and nerve injuries that required multiple surgical procedures and months of intensive rehabilitation. The scarring patterns were consistent with someone who'd been very close to a significant explosion. Dr. Patricia Williams, the lead surgeon who'd treated Elena's injuries, provided additional context that helped Martinez understand the severity of trauma Elena had survived. The explosion occurred while she was in direct contact with the device, Williams explained during their consultation. Most EOD specialists killed by IEDs don't survive long enough to reach medical facilities. Elena's survival was remarkable, considering the extent of her injuries. The surgeon described Elena's rehabilitation as exceptional, noting her dedication to recovery and her determination to return to functional capacity despite injuries that would have permanently disabled most people. Elena's psychological resilience had been as important as her physical therapy in achieving her current level of functionality. Martinez's investigation also revealed the classified nature of Elena's final operation and the reasons her injury had occurred under circumstances that required ongoing security oversight. The marketplace where she'd been working contained intelligence assets whose safety had depended on Elena's success in disarming the explosive device that ultimately caused her injuries. Elena's decision to continue working despite incoming enemy fire had protected civilian lives and preserved intelligence operations that remained classified years after the incident. Her injury was the direct result of choosing mission accomplishment over personal safety, reflecting the kind of selfless dedication that military awards were designed to recognize. The investigation revealed that Elena had been recommended for the Medal of Honor for her actions during that final operation, but the classified nature of the mission had prevented public recognition of her heroism. Her transition to civilian academic life had been coordinated to provide meaningful career opportunities, while maintaining operational security about missions and methods that remained sensitive. Martinez began understanding why Elena's behavior patterns sometimes seemed inconsistent with her apparent limitations. Her adaptive strategies reflected not weakness but sophisticated approaches to managing chronic conditions, while maintaining capabilities that exceeded what most healthy people could achieve. Her success at Princeton represented triumph over adversity that few people could comprehend. Wellington's harassment campaign had targeted someone whose actual qualifications and background made his accusations appear not just inappropriate, but tragically ironic. His assumption that Elena represented declining academic standards was contradicted by evidence that she possessed capabilities and experience that no normal hiring process could have identified or evaluated. The irony deepened as Martinez learned more about Elena's current research applications and their potential impact on protective technologies. Elena's work was contributing to defensive systems that could prevent the kinds of injuries she'd sustained, making her academic position both personally meaningful and strategically valuable for national security purposes. Martinez faced complex decisions about how to address Wellington's behavior while protecting Elena's privacy and operational security requirements that remained in effect. Revealing Elena's military background could expose her to dangers that extended beyond academic politics, while allowing Wellington's harassment to continue would represent institutional failure to protect a faculty member whose service deserved recognition rather than persecution. The investigation's final phase involved consultation with university legal counsel and security officials who possessed the clearances necessary to understand the full implications of Elena's situation. Martinez needed to develop approaches that would address Wellington's misconduct while maintaining the discretion that Elena's background required. Elena's research continued advancing toward breakthrough discoveries that would establish her reputation permanently, while contributing to technologies that served both civilian and military applications. Her dedication to excellence reflected values instilled through military service, commitment to mission accomplishment that extended far beyond personal recognition or career advancement. The contrast between Elena's actual capabilities and Wellington's perception of her as inadequate represented a fundamental misunderstanding of what true strength looked like. Her quiet professionalism concealed experiences that had tested her courage and competence under conditions that would have broken people without her specialized training and innate resilience. Martinez's investigation had uncovered the truth about Elena Vasquez, revealing not just a decorated military veteran, but someone whose expertise and sacrifice had contributed to national security in ways that demanded respect rather than harassment. The challenge now would be protecting Elena while ensuring that justice was served and Wellington's campaign was stopped before it caused irreparable damage to someone who deserved better treatment from the institution she served with such dedication. Wellington's final gambit came during Princeton's annual Engineering Excellence Symposium, a prestigious event that drew researchers, industry leaders, and media representatives from across the country. He'd spent weeks orchestrating what he believed would be Elena's ultimate humiliation, arranging for her to present her latest research findings to an audience of over 500 attendees in the university's largest auditorium. The symposium's timing was perfect for Wellington's purposes, coinciding with visits from potential major donors and defense contractors who represented millions in future research funding. Elena's failure in such a public forum would not only destroy her academic reputation but also demonstrate to university leadership that his concerns about her competence had been justified all along. Elena prepared for the presentation with her characteristic methodical precision, but the constant harassment had taken its toll. Her chronic pain was flaring beyond manageable levels, and the stress of months of systematic persecution had pushed her toward physical limits that even her military training couldn't indefinitely sustain. The morning of the symposium found Elena in her laboratory at dawn, making final adjustments to her presentation materials, while managing pain levels that would have sent most people to emergency medical care. Her adaptive strategies included carefully timed medication schedules and physical positioning techniques that helped maintain professional composure despite underlying agony. Wellington had ensured that Elena's presentation slot was scheduled during the day's most prominent session, when the auditorium would be packed with distinguished visitors and media representatives. He'd also arranged for several pointed questions to be asked during the Q&A period, designed to expose what he believed were fundamental flaws in her research methodology and theoretical understanding. Elena entered the auditorium through the presenter's entrance, moving with measured steps that concealed the extent of her physical discomfort while projecting professional confidence. The venue's layout required navigating several sets of stairs and uneven surfaces that created additional challenges for someone managing chronic leg pain, but she adapted her route to minimize visible difficulty. Wellington positioned himself prominently in the front section, surrounded by colleagues and distinguished visitors who would witness Elena's anticipated failure. His expression carried smug anticipation as he prepared to watch the culmination of his months-long campaign to destroy someone he viewed as undeserving of academic recognition. Elena's presentation began with technical excellence that immediately captured the audience's attention. Her research on advanced composite materials demonstrated innovations that could revolutionize protective applications across multiple industries. Her delivery was clear and confident, her visual materials professionally prepared, and her technical content sophisticated enough to impress even the most knowledgeable experts in attendance. The audience's engagement grew, as Elena described breakthrough discoveries that represented genuine advances in materials science. Industry representatives began taking detailed notes, recognizing commercial applications that could generate significant revenue while advancing protective technologies that served both civilian and military purposes. Wellington watched his carefully planned humiliation transform into Elena's professional triumph, his face darkening with rage as he realized that his victim was demonstrating capabilities that far exceeded his own expertise. When Elena opened the floor for questions, Wellington decided to launch his most aggressive attack yet. "Dr. Vasquez," Wellington interrupted, rising from his seat with theatrical authority, "your claims about material strength under extreme conditions seem remarkably specific. Perhaps you could explain exactly where you gained such detailed knowledge of explosive forces and blast effects. Your academic record shows no evidence of relevant experience in these areas." The question was designed to force Elena into either revealing classified information about her military background or appearing to make unsupported claims about technical subjects she couldn't legitimately discuss. Wellington's research had revealed enough about her EOD background to construct accusations that would be difficult to refute without compromising operational security. Elena's response was measured and professional, acknowledging the question while avoiding details that remained classified. Advanced materials research requires understanding how substances behave under various stress conditions. My knowledge comes from comprehensive study of documented test results and collaboration with researchers who specialize in extreme environment applications. The answer was technically accurate, but deliberately vague, providing Wellington with exactly the opening he'd been seeking. His follow-up questions came with increasing aggression, challenging Elena's credibility while implying that her research claims were based on fabricated or exaggerated expertise. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wellington announced to the packed auditorium, "we're witnessing exactly the kind of questionable scholarship that concerns serious academics. Dr. Vasquez makes claims about material behavior under explosive conditions that she cannot substantiate through legitimate research experience. This represents the dangerous lowering of academic standards that occurs when institutions prioritize demographics over qualifications. The accusation was calculated to destroy Elena's reputation while forcing her to choose between revealing classified information or appearing to concede Wellington's implications about her incompetence." Several audience members looked uncomfortable with the public confrontation they were witnessing, but Wellington's position within the university hierarchy made intervention difficult. Elena endured the systematic character assassination with stoic composure, but the physical stress of sustained performance under hostile conditions was pushing her toward limits that even her exceptional resilience couldn't indefinitely maintain. Her chronic pain was intensifying beyond manageable levels, while the emotional toll of public humiliation added psychological pressure that threatened her ability to maintain professional control. Wellington's attack escalated when he began making direct challenges to Elena's physical capability, suggesting that her obvious mobility limitations represented health problems that compromised her research effectiveness and raised questions about her fitness for continued academic employment. "Look at her," Wellington declared with theatrical indignation, gesturing toward Elena with dismissive contempt. "Can someone who can barely walk properly be trusted to conduct research involving complex laboratory procedures and hazardous materials? Her physical limitations create safety risks that endanger students and compromise research integrity." The personal attack crossed lines that made several audience members visibly uncomfortable, but Wellington's momentum carried him toward the climactic moment he'd been orchestrating for months. He approached Elena's position near the presentation podium, his aggressive body language designed to intimidate while providing maximum visibility for the humiliation he was about to inflict. Elena's hand moved unconsciously toward her left thigh, where scar tissue created phantom sensations that intensified during periods of extreme stress. The gesture was subtle but noticeable to Wellington, who had been studying her behavioral patterns long enough to recognize signs of vulnerability that he could exploit for maximum effect. Dr. Martinez entered the auditorium's rear doors just as Wellington's confrontation reached its most aggressive phase. She'd spent the morning finalizing authorization to reveal classified information about Elena's background, obtaining permission from defense officials who recognized that protecting Elena's cover was less important than preventing injustice that could compromise future recruitment of military specialists for civilian positions. Wellington's final attack came when he physically grabbed Elena's arm, ostensibly to demonstrate her instability, but actually to force a confrontation that would provide dramatic evidence of her unfitness for academic responsibilities. The sudden contact triggered defensive reflexes that Elena had learned to suppress in civilian environments, but Wellington's aggressive approach overwhelmed her careful self-control. Elena's automatic response to physical threat involved movement patterns that reflected her military training, fluid defensive positioning that created distance while maintaining balance despite her chronic injuries. The motion was too quick for her damaged legs to accommodate properly, causing her to catch her foot on the auditorium's raised platform edge. The fall was spectacular and painful, sending Elena crashing into the front row of seats with force that tore her carefully chosen professional attire. Her pants ripped along both legs, revealing for the first time the extensive scarring that she'd concealed beneath adaptive clothing and careful movement patterns. The auditorium erupted in shocked gasps as 500 people simultaneously witnessed the truth about Elena Vasquez. The scars on both legs told an unmistakable story of explosive trauma, revealing patterns consistent with someone who'd been very close to a significant blast. The tissue damage was extensive and distinctive, showing the kind of injuries that only occurred under specific circumstances. Wellington stood frozen as his perception of Elena as weak and inadequate shattered completely. The scars he was staring at represented trauma that would have killed most people, while Elena's ability to function at her current level suddenly appeared miraculous rather than inadequate. Dr. Martinez strode to the podium with documents that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the stunned auditorium, "I believe it's time for some essential clarification about Dr. Vasquez's qualifications and background." Martinez's revelation transformed the atmosphere completely, as she described Elena's military service as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist, her deployment history in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the circumstances that had led to her injuries. The classified nature of Elena's final operation was declassified specifically for this moment, revealing heroism that exceeded anything the audience could have imagined. Dr. Elena Vasquez is a decorated combat veteran who saved over 200 civilian lives during her final EOD operation, Martinez declared. "The scars you see are the result of an improvised explosive device that detonated while she was attempting to disarm it in a crowded marketplace. She continued working despite incoming enemy fire because abandoning her position would have meant certain death for everyone in the area." The revelation hit the audience like a physical blow, transforming their understanding of the quiet professor they'd watched Wellington torment. Elena's chronic pain wasn't evidence of weakness but proof of sacrifice that had protected innocent lives at tremendous personal cost. Wellington's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror as Martinez continued systematically destroying everything he thought he knew about Elena. His harassment campaign was revealed as the persecution of someone whose heroism and capabilities far exceeded anything he could comprehend. Elena remained on the floor where she'd fallen, her professional composure finally cracking as years of concealed trauma and months of systematic harassment overwhelmed her carefully maintained emotional control. Tears flowed down her face as she struggled to cover her exposed scars, decades of conditioning about operational security conflicting with relief that her secrets were finally revealed. David Chen pushed through the crowd to reach Elena, offering his jacket to cover her legs while speaking words of comfort and respect. "Professor," he said quietly, "you don't have to hide anymore. Everyone can see who you really are now." The auditorium's atmosphere transformed from shocked silence to overwhelming support as the audience realized they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Industry representatives who'd come to evaluate research opportunities found themselves in the presence of someone whose expertise had been earned through direct experience with the materials and forces she studied. Dean Harrison rose from his seat among the distinguished visitors, his expression combining professional outrage with personal shame at his institution's failure to protect someone who deserved honor rather than harassment. "Professor Wellington," he announced, "you are relieved of all duties effective immediately. Your conduct represents everything wrong with academic leadership, and you will face appropriate consequences for your actions." Wellington's supporters melted away like morning fog as the true scope of his ignorance and cruelty became apparent. Officers who'd built their reputations on attacking someone they perceived as weak found themselves utterly alone, their careers effectively ended by their association with persecution that now appeared monstrous. Elena's response to public vindication surprised everyone who expected celebration or vindictive satisfaction. When reporters attempted to interview her after the revelation, she simply said, 200 people went home to their families that day. That's all that matters. Nothing else is important." The aftermath of Martinez's revelation transformed Princeton's engineering department overnight. Elena's promotion to full professor came with expanded research facilities, and increased funding that recognized her exceptional contributions to both academic knowledge and national security. Her new position included responsibility for developing protective technologies that could prevent the kinds of injuries she'd sustained. Elena's first initiative in her expanded role was establishing the Stevens Memorial Research Program, named for the psychiatrist who'd helped her transition from military to civilian life. The program focused on developing materials and technologies that could protect military and civilian personnel from explosive devices, turning her personal trauma into tools that could save future lives. Wellington's transfer to a remote community college position in Alaska arrived within days, effectively ending his academic career at any institution of significance. His supporters distanced themselves completely, suddenly discovering urgent business elsewhere whenever his name was mentioned. Elena's teaching methods evolved to include sharing appropriate aspects of her military experience with students who could benefit from understanding how theoretical knowledge applied to real-world challenges. Her classroom became a bridge between academic research and practical applications that served both civilian and military purposes. The international recognition that followed Elena's revelation included consulting opportunities with defense contractors and academic institutions worldwide. Her expertise was finally being utilized at levels appropriate to her capabilities, contributing to protective technologies that would save lives for generations to come. Elena's daily routine still included morning exercises that maintained capabilities developed during military service, but the purpose had evolved from survival preparation to maintaining the physical fitness necessary for her expanded responsibilities. Her apartment remained modest, but it now served as an informal counseling center for veterans transitioning to civilian careers. The scars on Elena's legs no longer represented secrets to be hidden, but symbols of service that commanded respect and recognition. Her story became inspiration for students and colleagues who learned that true strength often appeared in forms that superficial observation couldn't recognize or appreciate. Dr. Martinez's investigation had revealed more than Elena's military background, uncovering a fundamental truth about recognizing heroism that often hid in plain sight. The quiet professor who'd endured months of harassment while producing exceptional research had been protecting not just classified information, but a legacy of service that demanded honor rather than persecution. Elena Vasquez had discovered that survival sometimes required accepting injustice, while maintaining commitment to purposes larger than personal recognition. Her transition from hidden veteran to respected academic leader proved that truth ultimately prevailed, even when its revelation required circumstances that no one would choose to experience. The engineering symposium that was supposed to end Elena's career instead marked the beginning of recognition that matched her contributions and capabilities. Wellington's campaign to destroy someone he perceived as weak had instead revealed heroism that would inspire future generations of students, researchers, and military personnel who understood that service meant sacrifice regardless of whether anyone was watching. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.